agenda tonight is we'll be covering the business goals and foundations of the detective challenge, is what our module is called. Actionable gamification frameworks, detailed game mechanics, advanced supporting mechanics, and general best practices and applications of gamification. So if we can go to the next slide then, Bob. So anyhow, just a quick introduction here. Our interest in current gamification began with one of our larger clients mentioned that they're noticing a drop in e-learning completion rates and really a loss in learner engagement. Our company did a survey of the industry to really try to ascertain where we're headed with AI and some of the other advancements. And one question that we asked is, what are the biggest challenges you face in delivering training to your employees? And the two highest responses that we received was one, low learner engagement, and the second one was time-consuming content creation. They were both tied at about twice the response rate of any of the other issues that were reported on. And knowing those two things out there, we said, hey, that's probably a good area that we could focus gamification on. And Bob has programmed gamification as a template. So it's got some AI enablement to help bring content into this template. We are able to reskin it, probably not within 2 hours, but we could come back with another metaphor using the underlying code that Bob used, and use that really to help the loss of learner engagement that we're seeing. The one surprising response that I got was when we asked about how many people are using learner engagement right now. And I was surprised to see that over 80% of people are not using gamification at this point. And it really makes me think that people aren't seeing the benefits from it, and maybe we're ahead of the curve a little bit, although that's hard to believe with how long it's been out there. But on the positive side, we noticed from the responses that the companies who are using gamification are really seeing a lot of success. 3 times as many companies are seeing the results equal or better than they'd expected to see. And 80% of the companies are using gamification see learners that are more engaged in the training, that are showing a higher completion rate, and learners retaining knowledge longer. And to me, those are all super positive results. Well, during the development stage, I did a review on a module that Bob created on Canada. And being from Minnesota, we're next door neighbors to Canada. Been up there and really like Canada camping and such. But I didn't know much about Canada. And I actually didn't know how much I didn't know until I took Bob's module. And I went through the module, and when I was done, I actually learned things. I retained the knowledge. I learned a whole bunch of things that I never knew. And it was really a good experience and really a good way to present knowledge like that. As I'm getting ready to close here turn it over to Bob, is that we have created a report on the effectiveness of gamification, and we'll be posting a link to that later in the presentation to all. So if anybody's interested, you can download it. So that's it for my introduction. And Bob, if you want to change the screen and take it over, I'll yield the floor to you.
Yeah, well, thanks so much, Rob. Before I get started, I really do want to reiterate my appreciation for the collaboration between LodeStar Learning and Rivertown Communications. And it's really the collaboration that combines our expertise that allows us to create interesting, useful, effective things. So it just, I want a working definition of gamification, and that is, um, but before I'll start with a working definition, but really today's presentation, I think, will fully explore what gamification is all about. Gamification is the use of game design elements in non-game contexts to increase engagement and motivation. I'd like to share just briefly at least three perspectives from some of my favorite people, some of my favorite thought leaders in the area of gamification. And that would be Jane McGonigal, Sebastian Dieterding, and UK Chow. To start with Jane McGonigal, I think a key takeaway from her work has been gamification can contribute to the greater good. Many of you will know Jane from her work with The World Without Oil. So it was a game that came out about 2007. It involved thousands of players. And basically, the game asked players to imagine simple and practical ways to adapt to a world without oil, and people contributed. They they crowdsourced ideas and contributed and posted and shared uh, their ideas of how they could get by in a world without oil. And certainly this is contributing to the greater good in terms of society. But I think one takeaway is how gamification can really contribute to just an institution or corporation and crowdsource ideas for solving an issue, improving safety, or any number of things related to the company or institution. Sebastian Dieterding, he's probably the gamification scholar, and you'll find Jane, Sebastian, UK Chow. You'll find them on YouTube. You can read their books. There's just so much material that they've generated. But one key idea from Sebastian Dieterding, I think that's worth sharing, is that some games can include a core challenge that equals the to be learned skill. Now, not all games do this. Not all gamified learning does that. But I do want to give you an example of what I'm talking about. I teach uh, as an adjunct faculty member. I teach graduate studies in learner experience design. And for my students, for my graduate students, I'm building a game that's essentially 5 levels. This is the LXD challenge. This is putting students who are studying LXD, learner experience design, putting them in a role where they get to practice learner experience design. So the levels essentially, this is combined as one level where they engage in analysis and select the right objectives to solve, to basically satisfy a business goal. They also can level up to creating assessments, developing activities, deployment, evaluation, and kind of in the spirit of successive approximations model, some of this can be very, very iterative. So the idea is that the LXD challenge engages students in analyzing a situation, selecting objectives, and then leveling up through each stage of LXD design and development. So the example relates to truck rolls. So the student is placed in the role of an LXD designer. They're hired by a solar panel company that installs solar panels and then maintains them. Sometimes things go wrong. The customer calls with a complaint. Something's not working right. They call first-tier customer service. And if the customer service person's doing his or her job, then essentially they may be able to solve the problem over the phone because they collect customer information. They might access the knowledge management systems. They may look at the instrumentation. They may do any number of things that will help the customer right there on the spot over the phone. If they can't, then a truck is dispatched with a technician to fix the customer's problem. And so this is the objective. This is the business goal of this solar installer. They want to reduce truck rolls. And I'll have to say this particular, just because there's quite a number of people from Allen Interactions here who have a connection, this actually relates to work that I did for Comcast to develop 7 courses that help essentially to reduce truck rolls. So the learner, the student does this is they interview. They're given a random scenario. So that's a key part of a gamification is some sort of randomization, something that's unpredictable. So a random scenario is selected by the gaming engine, and then the student has to interview the L&D, the learning and development director, the technicians, the dispatcher. They have to look at information. Like in this case, the information is related to the instruments, the knowledge management center, the dashboard tickets. Are people even using these things? They consult tech notes, call HR, and so forth. They eventually come up, but incidentally, as they're interviewing technicians, sometimes misinformation comes up, which is normal. That's, as LXD, not everybody gives us perfect information, and sometimes we have to kind of act as a detective to figure out what is actionable and what is not. So ultimately, the student will decide, given the underlying problem, given the underlying thing that's impeding, that's causing truck rolls, given that, what are the training objectives that can actually um, help reduce truck rolls, help solve the underlying issue. And so students then, they're given a whole matrix of objectives. They decide which particular objectives best match the randomized scenario, and then they're kind of evaluated. They're evaluated. They can be evaluated as an intern, a student, a newbie. If they've done really well, they're classified as a professional. So basically, related to Sebastian Detarding, where the core challenge equals the to be learned skill, the game aligns with real practices of LXD professionals. But not all gamified learning is that way. And there are other motivational drivers that one can consider. And I think that one of the interesting frameworks related to this actionable gamification comes from UK Chow. And again, his book is available. It's available free of charge. Actionable gamification that discusses the octalysis framework, just a way of thinking about gamification. Just briefly, so there are 8 points in the octagon, the octalysis octagon. So these are drivers. These are motivational drivers. These are things that help learners engage in the gamified learning. So meaning relates to epic meaning, doing something, contributing to something greater than oneself, being the epic hero. Accomplishment, obviously leveling up. Creativity, using one's ingenuity to solve problems on the fly. Ownership, getting things, acquiring things as a result of the game. Social influence, connecting with others. Scarcity, getting something that's rare. Unpredictability. So there's the randomness, and certainly it invokes curiosity. And of course, 8 is the avoidance of punishment, the punishment in the context of the game. So the top ones in the Octalysis framework are really what they call white hat drivers, and this is the potential. So when we developed the detective challenge template, it we understand that it has the potential of, you know, um, driving motivation through epic meaning, where players can connect with something larger than themselves, where they can contribute to the overall good of the company or the institution, perhaps as simple as promoting safety within an organization or whatever it is, something beyond themselves. Accomplishment, obviously, leveling up in the detective challenge, which I'll soon show. Being able to successfully move from round to round, empowerment, being able to have some autonomy and make decisions related to the game. So these are essentially white hat core drives that we try to build in, um, at least build in the potential of that inside the detective challenge framework. And aside from those motivational drivers, we also have embedded instructional strategies. One of them is making it stick. So allowing somebody to allowing the learner to find missing information, which helps them to recall that information. And the recall of information helps with retention. Recall helps with retention. Peter Brown, in Making It Stick, said you have to get it out to get it in. So obviously exposing a learner to principles and concepts and facts and having them recall those things in order to retain them. Spaced practice. So miss items get repeated. They might get repeated across intervals. They'll certainly get repeated across game instances because each time a player plays the game, it's different. It's different. The whole randomization makes it a kind of a different experience. Immediate feedback, and I recognize that. So in the game that we designed, feedback is immediate, and I'll show how. But not all games need to provide immediate feedback. In fact, there might be a strategic benefit to delaying feedback. And we've heard a lot about feedback is basically something that you can manipulate, whether it's providing it immediately or delaying it for good reason. So I want to provide a kind of an overview of the thing that we've been talking about, the detective challenge. Now, later I'll expose a link and it'll be in the chat. And this is an instance of this detective game, of the detective challenge. And essentially, what we try to do here is the Edmund Fitzgerald, um, you know, it sunk November 10th, so 50 years ago today, and to commemorate that tragedy, we created a detective challenge based on the Edmund Fitzgerald. Now, the after, once the template, all the work for the template was done, it took very little time to actually generate the Edmund Fitzgerald. And don't be too critical because it isn't a polished piece. Of course, if we were doing something for a company or an institution, an educational institution, we would pay a lot more attention to the details. But I think you'll find it interesting, and the link will come up. Uh, when we talk about the detective challenge, we can talk about products of the detective challenge, things that we use that we created with it. But detective challenge is essentially a template. It's a template um, with all the logic built into the template already. So this is a screenshot of LodeStar. LodeStar is an e-learning authoring tool. And with LodeStar, you're presented with a number of templates. Well, once you license from Rivertown Communications the Detective Challenge template, this will be available to you in your template previewer. And then essentially you take this template and create an instance of it as a specific project. You create a project from the template. So the way this template works is essentially it presents the case of the missing knowledge, gives you an introductory screen. This particular example that I'm going to focus on right now is Canada. So this is all about Canada. This is this week's episode. And we are guided through the uh, the whole game by a senior detective. And I just realized I wanted to show you a clip of that, but I'm guessing that you're not able to hear that because I forgot to click on share audio. Is that correct?
That's correct. We're not hearing anything.
Yeah, that's fine. So um, es essentially what this, I'll play it. You won't hear the sound, but you'll see that essentially the
Well,
detective
no,
is,
we were just getting some audio there, Bob.
I'm sorry,
We were just getting some audio there for a little bit.
you were getting audio,
Yep, yep.
probably through my own microphone. Okay, let me try. Welcome to the team.
Yep,
I
we're
just
hearing
got
you.
off the phone with the chief, and we have a new case that I think. Okay, so the senior detective guides you through the game, and then what happens here is at any time during the game, you can access case files. And the case files, what they include is information about the topic. So you can access these case files related to the topic, and you can also access a case file related to your own performance so that it gives you specific feedback on items you missed. And these are available at any time during the game. You go through initial round of interviews, and just to explain how this game works. Um, so essentially, your goal ultimately is to find the prime suspect. So in round one, this is round one of the game, 24 suspects are selected from a pool of 40 who actually provide you with useful missing information, so correct information. So the game randomly picks 24 suspects. And so if a suspect, so it builds profiles for each suspect. Now, some of these suspects will provide good information in round one, but in round two, fewer suspects might provide correct information. In round three, even fewer suspects. So the idea is that if you answer questions correctly here, if you find the missing knowledge, the probability of you getting to the prime suspect is greater. And so this is all randomized. In this particular screenshot, um, can you guess which, so to yourself, guess which suspects would be provide the correct missing knowledge and be promoted to the next level? So think about that really quickly and just to yourself, identify the suspects. Okay. So you would select them, and then I'll present one more screen where we're given four more suspects. How many of these would you promote to the next round? In other words, which suspects are giving you correct information? So essentially, you're getting your first 24 suspects and hoping that you're selecting the prime suspect among them. Incidentally, the these two pieces of information are correct. Canada's parliament consists of the House of Commons and the Senate, and Canada shares the longest undefended border with the United States. And all four of these are correct. So if we were to perform perfectly, we would already have 6 out of the 24 suspects. Now you complete round one, the initial interviews, and then your performance as a learner is then submitted to a learner record store using the XAPI protocol. So XAPI is built into this, and if you're not familiar with XAPI, there's a little more about that soon. But essentially, um, performance at every level is stored in a learner record store. We then get we advance to round two, and in round two, we're introduced to subtopics. The main topic in this case is Canada. Subtopics relate to geography, history, and politics. So Canadian geography, history, and politics, and then we meet the experts. And the experts provide us with key information about, in this case, geography. And then what we're able to do is we're able to interrogate these suspects. We click on a suspect and they give us information. Now, if the suspect in round 2, if the profile says provide correct information, then the suspect, clicking on the suspect, causes the suspect to draw from a data set of facts. So we get correct facts. Otherwise, they're drawing from the falsehood of that data set. And we get to click on as many times as we want. And so essentially it's this action of interrogation where statement after statement comes, and then we evaluate whether or not the suspect is giving us correct information. If they are, we then drag the suspect to a charge board so that we drag them to the center board, and then we charge these suspects so that they get promoted to the next round. So in succeeding rounds, you can see we're whittling down the suspects. Fewer suspects are going to give us correct information. In this case, only suspect 21 provides us with key information, but this is not the prime suspect because we get to round 5 and this suspect is giving us misinformation. And essentially, if we have no suspects left that provide good information, the game's over. In another scenario, this suspect, so this is a whole different scenario. We get down to the suspect who does provide good information in round 5. And if we recognize that the Canada Day is in fact celebrated on July 1st, then we've picked that prime suspect and we get placed on the leaderboard. So that just kind of gives you an overview of the detective challenge. It can be applied to any number of content areas. And I want to turn this over now to Micah Hoyt, who's responsible for the graphics of the detective challenge.
All right, thank you, Bob. So when this all started, I was scouring Adobe stock and things like that to try and get ideas of what this could look like, what ideas I could maybe get for different types of interactions. And I wasn't real thrilled with these graphics. I mean, we kind of see this kind of thing everywhere. Not that it wouldn't work, but it would be nice to have something better. And then some of the other ideas I had for interactions, I kind of went back and forth with Bob a little bit, and he showed me what was possible with LodeStar, which is kind of what took us the direction we were going to go. So with that being said, we started, Rob and I had been kind of looking for a way to have a old comic book theme on something for a lot of years, but it was never really appropriate until now. We started looking at it for this, and we thought, well, this might work. So what we see here on the left is a bunch of attempts through ChatGPT to kind of come up with the perfect guy, which is what we see in the top right. That's what we settled on, and used a software to do the videos that would make him lip sync the audio. So I attempted to get ChatGPT to give me all the mouth shapes in the bottom right there, but I didn't have much luck with that, so I ended up kind of having to draw them from scratch. But I just wanted to show that, you know, ChatGPT is coming along with what it can do. So moving to the next slide, Bob, if you don't mind. The next challenge was coming up with all the suspects, because we're going to need 40 of them. So I just went through, and this is just a handful of a lot of them. There was more than that, but did a bunch and kind of went through and picked the ones that looked appropriate and looked like they would work. And then next slide, Bob. So in each of the separate sections of the game, we have just a little different instructional video. And sometimes I need a different background. So in this instance, we have the opportunity for the training to share videos for the learner to learn from. And to do this, I took our same detective picture, which is the one on the top left. I had another one made where he's holding the reels and just took those out of there and added it to the guy, and then also took that screen from the third image. So there's no way for ChatGPT to ever just give me exactly what I wanted. So I would get the elements I needed to just create my own, and that seemed to work the best. So this is what I ended up with for the film slide, if the person making the training wants to share films. And then next slide, please, Bob. Same situation here. This is where he introduces the case files that Bob had referenced earlier. And this is just kind of the same picture with a file cabinet background instead. And we can go on to the next one. And here's when he's talking about interrogating the suspects. So I, again, took the same picture of the detective. I took that middle picture and added that window and then put all the suspects back there. And in the actual video, you'll see that they're kind of moving around just to give it a little bit of, visual excitement. And then on the next slide is where we get our experts that Bob also mentioned earlier. So again, the images on the left were all used to create the image on the right, and they'll all be animated slightly. They'll be moving, but they're not super animated. And then the next slide is the trial date. So he's standing outside the courtroom doors. He'll be talking there. And I think the slide after that shows more graphics of so the more just graphics of the experts. A lot of that's more just background image, just to add some pizzazz to the slides. And then the next part after that is this is where I made the mouth shapes for the lip sync. So you can see the different ones down there. The software I used is called Character Animator, and it's an Adobe software. And if you program a Photoshop file correctly, which I have on the right side, you have different layers for all the different mouth shapes, and then Character Animator will know what to do with that based on the lip sync. So there's a little bit of prep work, but it's actually a pretty slick program if you have the time and the know-how to do it. We've had a couple of projects where we've got to use that, and this worked pretty well for that. Can also add some movement with the arms and the legs, and this is what the interface looks like. So kind of like most video editing softwares, there's a timeline in the screen. You're kind of limited in a lot of ways, but I could have a presentation just on this, so I'll try to keep it brief. This is another type of software where we can use a little bit of motion tracking. So you can sync up the eyes and the mouth and the head using your camera on your laptop or your computer, and it will actually follow your head and your eye blinks, and it can even lip sync in live time to an extent. It's not perfect at it yet, but it's pretty good. And then you can record it as you're doing it and go back and make tweaks. And that's kind of how I created these. So there's different, if you go through the link that they're going to send out later, or one of the previous ones, and see the videos, you'll kind of see how these turned out. And that's kind of, I think, what I got.
Thank you so much, Micah. It's great.
Yep, this slide I didn't really have much to say other than what's on there, so I'll close with that. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, so this slide essentially in gamification generally, there's a couple of animation techniques that can be combined. So in a detective challenge, there's a lot of cell animation, and basically cell animation involves creating frame-by-frame sequences that produce smooth motion in game visuals. So animated GIFs are an example of cell animation. A bird flapping its wings. So the movement of the wings is frame by frame, is drawn frame by frame. Keyframe instead is changing a property on a timeline of perhaps an animated GIF. So whereas the cell animation might be a bird flapping its wings, the keyframe animation is what we need to have that bird fly across the screen. And we can, so I have an example of that, combining these two things, combining cell animation and keyframe animation. So, before I demonstrate that, there are some other aspects to the detective challenge that I think are noteworthy. One is that it contains datasets which hold information about topics and subtopics. We have integrated AI, so it's easy for you to get AI assistance while you're using a template to generate a game. We use randomization and scripting techniques to vary the game. We use data tracking, so we send information to a learner record store through the Experience API standard, and we promote social competition via our leaderboards. So here's a screenshot of LodeStar. You're able to So for the detective challenge template comes with a data set, but you can, for anything, you know, if you wanted to create something completely different, you can create your own data set. You can define your properties. So here, we're creating a data set with 3 defined properties: facts, falsehoods, and feedback. And we can go ahead and generate our data set here and then populate our data set. We can also use AI. So we click on this little symbol, which brings up this dialog, which allows us to put in a prompt so that AI will fill in, you know, any number of things. So here's the prompt: create 50 facts about Canadian geography matched with falsehoods and instructive feedback. So it's going to create 50 facts and it's going to fill the data set. That's exactly how the Edmund Fitzgerald was created. Now, of course, one has to go through and vet each AI contribution, but with the Edmund Fitzgerald, that's how that was created in such a short period of time, with the use of AI just filling in the data sets. LodeStar also comes with a scripting language. This is a scripting language that resembles JavaScript, but it's not JavaScript. It has its own parser. It's its own language. But essentially, and I know this is where people draw the line. Many people draw the line. Well, I don't want to have anything to do with coding. Well, if you use a detective challenge template, you don't have to do it. All of this is in the background. And essentially, what this code is doing is uh, randomly picking 24 suspects out of 40 and then assigning them a profile so that they give correct information in the first round. But if you're interested in using the tool and designing your own templates or designing your own interactions, this language is available and it's AI assisted. So this is all integrated with AI. Here's that symbol where it can help you write this script. Now, our use of XAPI, now, if you're not familiar with XAPI, it's the Experience API. And so essentially, we're sending statements to a learner record store, in this case, Veracity. So in this first statement is the actor is Nick Lerner. And what did he do? What's the verb? He scored 90%. So we have actor, verb, and object, sent to the learner record store. So learners generate statements that get stored in the learner record store. So you don't have to have this back-end database. You can use publicly available learner record stores. And the interesting thing here, and I think this is, so for the leaderboard, I don't have to have this database and all this database connectivity. What I'm able to do here is all that information that's in a learner record store, I can retrieve and just filter out everything but the final score. So if you made it to the leaderboard, if you made it to the end, if you picked the prime suspect, then you have a final score and we display that in the leaderboard. So nothing extra is needed. You just connect to a learner record store and you can populate your leaderboard that way without a separate database. Now, I realize time is short, so I wanted to very quickly introduce yet one more concept that's related to the animations I was referring to earlier, the combinations of cell animation and keyframe animation. Um, so this concept is called a state machine, and here's Duolingo. So I think many people recognize Oscar from Duolingo. So Oscar, he'll move from an idle state to, you know, a frown if you answered incorrectly and then get reset, or he'll move from an idle state to an expression that he displays when you've gotten the correct answer. So essentially, we're moving this animation from state to state. This is a state machine. And here's an example of that. So when I click, a fish is dropped. That's one state. Fish swimming to the right. So this is a second state. Fish swimming to the left. is a third state. And then finally, the water quality of this aquarium is affected. The water quality drops and fish transition into a fish kill state. So I mean, for you to think about, okay, you want a game and you want your game to include these GIF animations. You go to a photo library, and believe me, it's almost impossible getting what you want. Like, for example, I wanted, in that example, I wanted a Bolivian ram. I wanted a Bolivian ram swimming right. Well, to find that in a library is just about impossible. So instead, I used Midjourney, which is an AI service. I asked Midjourney to create a Bolivian ram and make it swim against a black background. Then I was able to just drop the video that was produced by this AI service, drop the video into Photoshop and convert the video frames into layers, and then just drop. I had a little script that drops the background so that in the end, I end up with this, in this case, neon tetra who swims. And then I place that neon tetra into a state machine. So this is LodeStar's state machine. So in this case, this is swim. The label for this state is swim. Branch op, this is a branch op. What happens when we enter the state? What happens when we exit the state? And here, what happens during the state of swimming? So this is gobbledygook. It looks like gobbledygook. These are keyframes, and most people would be hard pressed to write these keyframes. So here we have AI that supports the creation of those keyframes. So we just ask AI within LodeStar, create keyframes that represent a fish swimming from left to right on the screen. It creates the keyframes, we drop that in. If you're not interested in AI assistance, we provide an editor where the keyframes, so here the keyframes are represented by these little diamonds. So we can change the position of an animated GIF. We can change, from left to right. We can change the left position or left property, change the top property, change the opacity, change the rotation, change the scale. And with just this small combination of things, we could do a lot. And in this case, this timeline is given an ID that we could just drop into here. We can drop the ID of the keyframe animation that we created, and that can be representative of a single state. So the swim state is essentially this fish, and the fish is going through the cell animation. It's wiggling its fins, its tail fin, and the keyframes are repositioning this fish from left to right on the x-axis. And then, so in gamification, we can have our characters move from a seated position to preparing to stand up to standing up to standing. So with the combination of all these things, I think we can do some interesting things with gamification. When we consider motivation, when we add animation, randomization through scripting, when we create opportunities, challenges that allow learners to accomplish things, the use of leaderboards, and actually creating a leaderboard just with the use of XAPI, nothing terribly special, and then the use of state machines. So all of these things combined can create a very interesting experience. Now, again, this is not polished, but we wanted you to be able to, after today's session, try out the detective challenge on your own. So in the chat, hopefully Jothan has added to the chat both this URL on the Detective Fitzgerald challenge, plus there's a link to Rivertown Communications created a gamification report. So I think that's very, very interesting read. So this will allow you to experience a little bit of what we've been talking about all this evening. lastly, I want to mention that uh, the detective challenge may not interest you, but the process of having an instructional designer, the process of being able to create a template, having some expertise that'll design a template that you can then turn over to subject matter experts to complete, I think is a very, very, very interesting proposition. And, LodeStar Learning and Rivertown Communications can also support that beyond the detective challenge. So I just want to pause there. I think the very, very last thing I'd like to say is that we've now made it possible within LodeStar to do one-click publishing to the Inspire Learning Management System. LodeStar publishes to a whole variety of standards, including CMI5, but with one click, you can publish to the Inspire Learning Management System that is hosted by Rivertown Communications. I'd like to just stop there and stop sharing and